2019. For those that haven't had the pleasure of being in a meeting before, a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, if you'd silence your cell phones, we'd appreciate that greatly. After we do all that, we'll do the roll call and approval of the minutes. Then we'll go over item by item. And the way this works is city staff presents on an item. After they're done presenting, it's open just to the commission for technical questions. Once we're done with our questions, we open it up to public comment. So if you have something to say, please step up to the microphone, state your name and address so we have it for the minutes, and say your piece, and be prepared to answer a question or two from members of the commission. Once everybody from the public has taken that opportunity to speak, we close public commentary, bring it back to the commission for a discussion and then a vote. With that, let us call the roll, Amina.
Kathleen Probb.
Here.
Lindsay Erickson.
Here.
Michael Ford.
Here.
John Hintz.
Present.
John Kiefer.
Here.
Lori Palmieri.
Here.
Thomas Perry.
Here.
Justin Mitchell.
Here.
Derek Groth. Thomas Foytek.
Here. Moving on to the approval of the minutes from the August 6th meeting. Do we have any additions, corrections, deletions, et cetera, to those minutes?
Motion to accept. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion clearly passes. Moving on to item number 1, extraterritorial land division and certified survey map at the West 1300 block of County Road I in the town of Nakaimai. Do we have any site inspections from the commission on that? All right, we do. And then we do accept the staff report as part of the record. Now it's up to you all.
Thank you, sir. This is a extraterritorial land division in the town of Nakaimai, approximately 1.5 miles south of the Oshkosh city limits. The subject site is, or the parent parcel or subject site is currently 44.69 acres in size with a A2 general agricultural district zoning. The applicant is proposing to split off 5 acres. I should go back. The parcel does currently have double frontage along County Trunk I and Nakaimai Avenue to the south. And the applicant is proposing to split off 5 acres along the frontage of County Road I. Currently, the site is used predominantly for agricultural purposes, with the exception of a single-family home located on the parent parcel. The proposed lot is irregular in shape, approximately 545 feet at its widest point, which would be along the west lot line, and approximately 542 feet deep and just under 5 acres in size. The proposed lot does exceed Winnebago County subdivision ordinance in regard to size, width, and depth. And just one thing to note, lot 1 over here, my next one is a close-up of the site. There's a close-up of the subject division and is bounded by a intermittent navigable stream along the south boundary, and it is impacted by Winnebago County's shoreland zoning district. The purpose of the division is to sell a lot for a proposed single-family development per the submitted application. Overall, the land division will not drastically alter the existing land use pattern in the area and should not have any impact or negative impact on the surrounding area due to the large lot size requirements imposed by Winnebago County. The division is consistent with the city's comprehensive land use plan, which is rural residential for this general area. And if in the future the rest of the acreage wishes or proceeds to develop, this land division will not impact that ability. The Department of Public Works reviewed the proposed land division and did not have any additional concerns. So just a copy of the proposed CSM. One thing just to note, Winnebago County does not require to show the entire parent parcel. This was originally divided as a certified survey map, so when it's already been platted through CSM, they are not required to show the entire parcel on whenever there's a following our additional land division. So staff is recommending approval of this extraterritorial land division as proposed.
All right, thank you. Technical questions? Go ahead, Mayor.
A question. So the proposed single-family development, is that a development as in multiple units?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, just one single family house.
Unit. Okay.
Correct. Sorry.
All right. That's all.
Other technical questions? Yes, go ahead, Justin.
About a month and a half ago, we talked, and the city had indicated that they don't track or really monitor farmland loss or really anything. I'm wondering if anything's been done in the last month and a half or so to start tracking local farmland loss that we have.
That would probably fall under Winnebago County. I remember we had that discussion, but that's just something that the city
nothing
doesn't track.
Nothing that the city does. Anything on, we talked about that the city doesn't really have any programs for preservation, despite that it's part of the comprehensive plan and kind of city language. Has there been any steps taken for researching farmland preservation programs or anything?
Nope.
Okay, so just one follow-up then. Is there a possibility that, and I'm sorry that Mark isn't here and I didn't have this ready for him prior, but is it possible, or what steps have to happen if we're going to request, or can we request a workshop with either UW Extension or East Central Wisconsin Regional Planning? Because I know both of those programs also have kind of a connection to farmland preservation, and it would seem that this is going to keep coming up and we're going to keep saying, well, it's something important, but we don't do anything with it.
You can make that request. Maybe when Mark gets back, we can, look into it further. Maybe we can, that's a good idea, setting up something with East Central to take a broader, look at Great Winnebago counties.
Yeah, that would be great. I don't know if other folks have an interest in that, but
We'll make a note of it. We'll let them know.
great, thank you.
All right, other technical questions? Yes, Lindsay?
Is there any impact on future development with it being in the county's shoreline zoning district?
There's just additional setback requirements. Go back to the air photo here. Any development per Winnebago County Shoreline Zoning District requires, I believe, a 75-foot setback from the ordinary high water mark of the stream. So that's pretty much the gist of the impact on the property. So they would not be allowed to build any sort of structures, driveways, that sort of thing within 75 feet of the stream. So.
All right, thank you. Any other technical questions? Seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Doesn't look like it. Back to the commission.
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Second. I think John got him. John and John. All right, any discussion? Well, seeing none, call the roll.
Ford,
Aye.
Vince,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
Perry,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Prop,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
On to item number 2, commercial design standards variance to allow facade alterations using Class 4 materials at 1026 Oregon Street. Do we have any site inspections out there? Okay, several site inspections. And then we do accept the staff report as part of the record. On to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for this item, it is a commercial design standards request, and they are coming in asking to use Class 4 materials to reclad part of their building. So we'll get into this a little bit here. Here's the subject site in blue, and you can see it is a corner site there at Oregon and 11th. It is right now it's an office building. It is zoned CMU, so central mixed use. A number of the properties around here are zoned similarly and are a mixture of commercial, and then there's some residential kind of off in each direction here, kind of off to the east and the west. But some mixed commercial uses there along Oregon. You see an aerial here showing our subject site there. So they are here before us today, and we'll get into the code reference here really quickly. Typically, commercial buildings have to be predominantly clad in Class 1 materials. So usually 50% of the facade has to be Class 1. You can use Class 2 and Class 3 materials as accents and trim, but Class 4 materials are prohibited typically. So they have to have a variance or have to request a variance and be approved in order to use Class 4 materials like what we're going to see here. And so we as staff had talked to them. They came to the counter down by us in planning, and they had talked about this building here at 1026 Oregon. So like I said, it's a corner site. It's reasonably prominent. You can see some of the context here, some of the surrounding buildings. But they've got these wood shakes here on the mansard roof. And they are kind of deteriorated. What the applicant has said is that they are proposing to use a ribbed metal panel to reclad this mansard roof here. And then I think that they would also repaint this down here, down at the wall here. So really what they're looking to do for class 4 materials is the rib metal panel just on the mansard. The applicant wants to do something that is more low maintenance than what they have. Rather than redo it in shingles or shakes or whatever, they just want to put up a metal panel. Their argument is that the building immediately to the north and a number of other buildings along Oregon actually use a similar product. So we as staff took that into consideration when we looked at this. Here's just some of the context. So I showed you a photo that they just provided to us. And then this is looking here, actually south, I believe. So kind of looking, you can see the church there in the background. Red's Pizza actually is here. And I bring that up because the applicant is proposing to use kind of a bright red color panel, similar in color to this band here. And they argue that a number of these buildings actually have this bright red, so they believe that they should be permitted to use a similar color. You can see on this building here on the front, there's another example of that rib metal paneling there. And just in general, a mix of buildings here, scales and characters. Some are more utilitarian, some are more architecturally, I guess, prominent. This is looking to the north. Here's the subject property, and then you can see that building to the north with the rib metal paneling there. And I believe if you go up even further, there's similar siding used. Just another example of the context further up. So here again, showing an application of a similar product just for a small area of the facade there. This is an example of what they proposed to us. So you can see the bright red product. They'd be tearing off the deteriorated, rotted shakes and replacing it with these rib steel panels. Here is the material specification sheet from Menards, and you can see bright red there. That's what they're proposing. And then this is just a cross-section here of the material plan to be used. We as staff looked at this, like I said, and I think that, we looked at the intent of the ordinance sections, namely the trying to prevent the use of purely utilitarian panels and products on buildings. But we also did look at the character of the surrounding buildings, the subject building. It isn't a particularly, it's not an architectural masterpiece, so we took that into account. And then the information provided by the applicant during the process. We as staff do not have concerns with the proposed material. We do have concerns with the bright red that they're proposing. And so that was the one area that we had some reservations. And we would recommend approval of this variance request, but with these conditions. So pretty standard that we like to see as staff maintaining in a rust-free state the metal paneling if it is approved. Just general maintenance would be performed on it as needed. The variance being only for the mansard roof, and the owner and petitioner shall file separate requests for any future facade work where they want to use class 4 materials or deviate from the base standards of the ordinance. Revising the color of the metal paneling and submitting that to our staff for review and approval, and then making sure that there is a complementary colors between the proposed metal paneling and the remainder of the building. And our finding was that the variance would not be contrary to the public interest.
All right, thank you, sir. Technical questions, John, and then Mayor Palmieri.
As somebody who's spent over 40 years on the south side of town, I know this area definitely needs a lot of work on a lot of buildings. And I just was wondering what kind of precedent we're setting, because there are a lot of buildings that need work, and we're probably going to see other buildings coming in. I mean, are we setting a precedent here where we're going to see other buildings coming in with these class 4 materials to, tighten up their buildings where it's basically putting a little bit longer term Band-Aid on instead of actually fixing the problem, which is we have buildings that are deteriorating, like you were saying. And that's my big worry is, are we setting a precedent where some of these other buildings, and I don't want to single out anybody, people would know who they were, but if they start coming in and they say, well, you let them put up all this siding, why can't I put up siding? So is that a concern with the city on this?
And I talked about this with Mark, and I think we did think about that. We did look at it specifically for this one here, looking at the context, seeing that there are so many other examples of this already. It isn't a particularly beautiful material. At the same time, now if it was something like, say they're replacing brick with this, then I think we'd have some concerns because they are going from a class 1 to a class 4. But based on what they have now, and based on the building itself and the context, I think that we were a little less concerned. We have had a lot of examples where, particularly in the downtown, which is a separate area, where they, on the sides of the buildings, they've tried to propose metal paneling, and that is where we've had greater concerns because of the historical character, the prominence of that area. A lot of this is not part of a historic district. They're not individually listed buildings. They're not necessarily architecturally significant. So that was where we were coming from, but that's a fair concern.
Well, and just, the building's so much different than the rest of the buildings, so I mean, I
For sure.
understand treating it a little differently also.
Yep.
So,
Thank you. Mayor?
Can you go back to the street view picture, if you would, that had several of the other buildings?
Oh, sure.
So right here.
Oh, right here? Okay. Go back here. There.
So my first question is, how is this any different than metal roof material? I mean, is there any concern about wind removing it? It sounds like the staff analysis determined it might be more secure than the cedar shakes or the wood shakes that were on there previously. I don't have a problem with that color, especially if you look at, how many other bright red, it almost might be complementary and cohesive, but that's just me. I like red. And especially given that it doesn't have that significant historic distinction. But my main question technically is there any concern with the stability or the adhesion of the metal or it coming off?
I would say from our standpoint, they would have to make sure that they follow the manufacturer's specifications. That'd be up to them to make sure that they do that. I guess I wouldn't be as concerned as long as they're following the specs and they're attaching it properly. It should be pretty secure at that point.
Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead, Justin, and then.
Can you give me a quick rundown on, like, why does maybe a more, sturdy, long-standing metal roof, why is that classified as something less desirable than like a asphalt shingle roof? And I know this isn't like a standard roof or a flat roof. This is the
Part roof, part
Answer.
side.
yeah. What's
a hybrid.
the name of it? But what determines that it's a class 4, other than just being on a list? Like, why is it on that list versus class 3 or something?
I think because it's more of a product you'd see perhaps on more of an industrial building or a storage building, et cetera. It's pretty utilitarian in appearance. We have, for our residential design standards, allowed standing seam metal roofing. And I do believe we would allow something like this for, if it was perhaps not a mansard, but more of a lower angle roof. Our design standards aren't as concerned with those types of applications. But I think it was an aesthetic concern when the steering committee came up with the new ordinance and did the rewrite.
Sure.
We did try to encourage, that's why we looked at a similar concern came up as to what you're bringing up with the residential applications. That's why we redid or came up with a new standing seam ordinance for residential.
Sure.
Was to allow it for those. For these, there is still that in the ordinance. It is something we can look at. We can bring it to Mark's attention and see what he would like to say. But I think it was from an aesthetic standpoint, being more utilitarian and such.
Sure.
Yep.
Just a quick follow-up then. So if you go back to the photo that
Sure.
has just that specific lot, are there no stormwater management requirements for a commercial lot that doesn't occupy the entire lot? And the context is this is kind of a visible area on a main corridor, and it's about as aesthetically just there as you can imagine. There's almost no green space, nothing of you look at like the Wagner building next door, there's these nice giant pots with plants. There's no trees. There's like, are there no requirements? And if they're asking for a variance here, is that not something or a time when we can look at imposing some sort of requirement?
So for those, and Justin can also speak to those, but I think with this request, anything we're making would have to be directly related to this request, so we wouldn't be able to start tacking on additional, and, you know, I'm sure Mark will correct me if he comes back and I'm wrong,
Sure.
or any of the other senior planners. But I think that, you know, stormwater would be triggered if they were expanding, for example, or disturbing areas of the impervious area, like, you know, the pavement and such. If they were looking to expand that, we'd be looking at something, you know, stormwater requirement-wise, management-wise. But for a design standards request, I don't believe we could condition anything that, you know, that they have to address that or put in more landscaping or remove impervious surface or whatever.
Sure.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, any other technical questions? Tom, and then John.
Why are you, sorry. Why are you against the red, the color? Is it just because it's too bright? Is it too?
I think that's what we thought, is it'd be very prominent. Now, they do make a point, a pretty valid point, that, you know, there are some awnings and such that are similar in appearance perhaps, but we thought it'd be pretty prominent on that corner. And when Mark and I discussed it, we just thought, you know, it'd be a nice compromise to ask them for a more subdued color, but allow the material.
Go ahead, Tom.
The material doesn't bother me at all. I think it would be an improvement over what is there right now. However, the red will go back to our traditional chicken versus the egg discussion of colors for metal seam roofing. Also, is it a branding issue? So when you mentioned reds before, I would submit that reds, color red, could be considered part of its signage, which then makes that signage not conforming because it would be way too big. And so it's the same as Buffalo Wild Wings being yellow. So I'm not entirely sure that I'm in agreement with the red because other things are red. You know, just because everybody jumps off a cliff doesn't mean that you should do it too. And so I'm supportive of the staff's decision on this, and I think the metal seam would be an improvement.
All right. Other technical questions? Okay, seeing none, anyone here from the audience to speak to this item today? Apparently nobody. Okay, back to the commission. Do we have a motion?
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendation as stated in the staff report.
Second.
Okay, discussion. What's the start? Go ahead, Kath.
We've had a lot of discussion already, but I think we should approve this. But I do prefer the subdued color, so I'm going with the staff recommendation.
Mayor, it looks like you want to read.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking back to just a couple of months ago when we had an extremely detailed presentation for a larger new development on the south side, and we approved both Plan Commission and at council for rusty colored metal cladding and this kind of thing on significant portions of the building, and it seems to be kind of a subjective thing. And I guess if we're encouraging, you know, older buildings to kind of update and improve their appearance, you know, I feel like they should have that option. But I'm okay without the restriction. So that's really all I have to say on that.
I guess I would support what the mayor said, and I applaud the staff for, because I do believe this is an upgrade, and I think you're looking at, it's an upgrade as opposed to what was there. In terms of color, sometime we should have a discussion about color, because I have no issues with what people choosing whatever color they want for their building, but I'm still willing to support what you have now. Other discussion? Go ahead.
Question. Have you gotten any feedback from the petitioner about the color?
We did actually. And so the petitioner actually said that they bought this, or they ordered and bought this material, special order from Menards. And apparently they can't return it. So that was, they already have it and they have the color and everything. So we did get that. And wanted to add, Mark had said, you know, and I forgot to include this, but staff also felt that it was a greater percentage than, for this building proposed as far as the red than some of the other, where you'll see it, some of the other applications in the area. So, again, that's why we felt the way we did. But I can see both sides, and I guess it's up
Right.
to you. If you guys want to keep the conditions, if you don't, I did draft an alternative that, if someone wants to make a motion either way, I've got this language in case you wanted to take that condition out. It's really up to you. So if someone wants to read this in to the record, they can, but it's, yeah.
Michael?
Yeah, I'd like to make that motion to remove
So
condition number 3.
if you want that, I'll pass
Yeah.
this down to you. So I've got that for you.
You anticipated this, huh? So did I just read this whole thing?
Yes, you can read, you see here, sorry about that.
Motion.
We have
Yeah.
a motion.
We have a motion on the
In
table.
We have a
quotes.
motion on
Yep.
the
So we
table.
can, so
Unless
you-
we're
you
amending
would
the
be
motion.
Amending the
Yes,
emotion.
make a
right?
motion to amend the emotion.
Okay.
Amend the emotion, not the motion.
No, not the emotion.
I know, it's-
A lot of
color makes
moving.
me emotional. So I just want to I want to make a motion to amend the current motion on the table by removing condition 3.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
A second, any discussion on that? Go ahead.
I'll just say quickly, I made the motion, obviously, because I'm in agreement that, especially for Oregon Street, which is kind of a second downtown, having some color and vibrancy doesn't bother me at all. And we have on there the 4th condition, which remains that anything else they do has to be complimentary. I think that protects ourselves from having a monstrosity.
All right. Let's go ahead.
May I ask,
Justin and Kathy.
so the application that was submitted by the owner or by Let Signing and Trim?
That was submitted by Let Signing and Trim, which is the contractor.
Sure, and so the contractor filled this out?
Yes, they did.
And so I just thought this is worth noting that a contractor of siding and maybe roofing or siding and trim in Oshkosh stated they were not aware of zoning. They've been operating in Oshkosh and didn't realize there were building requirements and zoning requirements. That's not the city's fault, but I just thought that was worth noting of, I don't know, and he says that he's been operating in the city for 40 years. So I don't even
It
know
is
how that's
somewhat of a new,
conceivable.
I think.
The new zoning.
Design
reform,
standard
all zonings
variance.
now.
But
Yeah.
building requirements and that's, getting permits, that
So
shouldn't be
bad.
new.
Yeah.
Kath?
I'm going to support the amendment because the applicant already has purchased the material, but I want to note that I'm sorry that they went ahead and bought it without.
Can I
John?
ask, Mr. Chairman, can we accept the amendment as a friendly? Because you moved it, I seconded it. If we accept it as a friendly, then we would.
Yes.
Yeah, let's,
right?
That would be nice.
Then we can just vote on one thing instead
Yep.
of voting twice?
I would agree, yeah.
whatever.
All right, so the original motion person
Was.
did a friendly amendment, and
Said-
Kathy's, you're okay,
Yeah.
Then we're okay, then we can vote once. Any other
Trying to
discussion?
save time.
Get what we're doing here?
Yep.
All right. All right, then we are going to vote.
All right.
Call the roll.
Ford,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
Perry,
No.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Prop,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye?
Motion carried 8-1 with amended condition.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 3, this is a public hearing. A zone change from suburban mixed-use district to suburban mixed-use with a planned development district for property located at 237 North Washburn Street. Do we have any site inspections from that one on Washburn there? We have several. Okay, we accept the staff report as part of the record. On to you.
Thank you, Mr.
Stephen?
Chairman.
Mhm.
Yep. So this item is a rezone request for 237 North Washburn Street. So here's the subject site, right here in blue, and then you can see right now it's just straight SMU, I believe. And it's a pretty simple rezone. The reason they want to do it is because the property immediately to the west, where the senior living facility is going to be going in, is zoned SMU PD, but they have this small area here, a paved area, that they really are not going to have a use for. And so the owner of this property wants to pick up this small strip of paved area. And to do so, they have to rezone to be consistent with the property here. So they're proposing that we rezone them to suburban mixed use with a planned development overlay. They are not proposing any type of site changes at this point. As I mentioned, this is already SMUPD and was recently rezoned to SMUPD. That senior living community, that we're working through some of that currently from a staff standpoint. This property here is used by Franklin Equipment for commercial and equipment rental and storage, and would continue to be used as that. So it's not going to be, there's going to be no site changes proposed at this point. They just want to rezone this entire parcel so that they'd be consistent with this, and then there'd be a transfer of land, this here to this parcel, and eventually combined. So staff does not have concerns with this. We recommend approval of the zone change from suburban mixed use to suburban mixed use with a plan development overlay as requested.
All right, thank you, sir. Any technical questions on this one? Go ahead, Mayor.
Just a quick one, and that is, so they don't have any plans for changing that use at this time, but is there anyone or any thought as to future use for that strip?
I believe that the main thing is that they just want to have access and have this as an entire paved area. Right now, it's non-conforming in the sense that it's divided right down the middle of it. And so they want to, because these folks don't have a reason or a use for it, they want to transfer to them here, and then they would just have this so that they can access this back here and have this be a contiguous paved area, all under one ownership.
I think it's more circulation of the site, just to have that access around the building.
Other technical questions? Okay, seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Come on up, sir, state your name and address so we have it for the minutes, and tell us what you think.
Good afternoon, Attorney Russ Reff, 217 CP Avenue, Oshkosh. I'm here on behalf of Shoreland Development. Chris Pomeraning, whose family owns the property, is also here, just basically to answer questions. But I just want to make one thing clear. What's happening here is my client actually has an easement that runs from Witzel Avenue to the north to the edge of that paved property. And we've had that for many years and have used that easement. The easement ended short of that paved piece of property. Art Pomeraning paved that property many, many years ago, assuming it was part of the easement. And we actually have an adverse possession claim to that parcel. So that's one of the reasons that it's being deeded to us. In addition to that, we had an easement that essentially goes from Witzel through part of the Wirch property where the senior living development will be, and then goes east to the back of the Fleet Farm property where our access easement off of Witzel is. We're eliminating that easement on their property so that they will be able to develop it better in exchange for that piece of land in the back. And it's something that has been used for many years since it was paved, and this just came up when we saw the property was being developed. So, and we did consult with staff. Staff recommended the zoning change as the best way to address that. We consider it a win-win. It gives the city a little bit more control over our site, but it also gives us the flexibility if we want to do something in the future to do it with a base standard modification rather than a variance. So I think it's a win-win situation for everyone.
Sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Seeing none, back to the commission. Do we have a motion?
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendation as stated in the staff report.
Second.
Second, okay, discussion. Pretty straightforward. Okay, seeing none, let's call the roll, Mina.
Ford.
Aye.
Vince.
Aye.
Kiefer.
Aye.
Palmieri.
Aye.
Perry.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Prop.
Aye.
Erickson.
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
On to item number 4. This is a public hearing. Conditional use permit request for expansion of an outdoor patio area at 24 East Grunwald Avenue.
Site inspections?
Oh, have we had any site inspections? We got several people. In fact, I've done that as well. All right. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Now it's up to you.
So this is a,
And we do accept the staff report as part of the record. Forgot that too.
this is a conditional use permit request for expansion of an existing outdoor commercial entertainment land use. So outdoor commercial entertainment land uses are permitted only by conditional use permit in the neighborhood mixed use district. So here's the subject site. It is located on the northwest corner of East Grunwald Avenue and Jefferson Street. It is home to the Jockey Club Bar,
which includes about a 1,700 square foot building and associated outdoor patio area. The surrounding area is mostly residential uses. There also is another bar across Jefferson Street. So here's an aerial view of the subject site. So we have the bar here with the existing patio area to the west. So outdoor eating and drinking areas are considered outdoor commercial entertainment, and that requires a CUP in the NMU district. The petitioner is requesting approval of the CUP to expand the existing patio area on the west side of the building. So here's the site plan. They state that their reason for the request is to increase available space for customer use and also have additional area for the grill pad. So here's that patio area, roughly 225 square feet, and then here's where that concrete grill pad would be, roughly 120 square feet. Currently, the existing total impervious surface area is about 4,600 square feet, which comes to a ratio of about 32% for the site. And with the additional concrete for the patio and grill pad, the impervious surface will be roughly 34.3%, and that's still well under that maximum impervious of 50%. Staff is supportive of the proposed patio expansion, as the use should not be detrimental to the surrounding area. And the patio and grill pad areas are relatively small in size, and they do not extend toward the neighboring residential uses. Public Works did review the request, and they did not note any concerns. And staff recommends approval of the proposed CUP to expand an existing outdoor commercial entertainment use at 24 East Grunwald Avenue as proposed with the findings in your staff report.
All right, thank you, Brian. Technical questions? Go ahead, Kathy, and then Mayor.
Frankly, it looked to me on site inspection as though it had already been done. It's freshly landscaped and it looks very nice, but has it already been done?
I did hear that they have done that, and I mean, they shouldn't be doing any work without a permit. Typically, if you do work without a permit, you will be charged a late fee for that.
Just an observation.
Mayor.
I wish that was on my list of places that I had made it to, because my question is about acoustics and music and noise. We've had a number of calls about outdoor establishments over the years, and especially as we continue to add to it. They're exciting and they're fun, and we like them. But in the residential areas, particularly if we double the number of people outside and bands and outdoor things, perhaps that can be detrimental to some of the residents. So I was going to ask if they intended to do any kind of acoustical mitigation, to minimize that, but since it's already been done, that's a different story.
I should just note that they have planted like a wall of arborvitae trees out along both the north and the west side of the lot, and maybe, 25 or 30 of them. So, I mean, they're tiny, but, they'll be a barrier. My thought was, a bunch of folks smoking and there's kids next door and partying, but, at some point there'll be a nice wall of green.
Plus, aren't they still have the same ordinances you have to follow in terms of noise? Yep. Other technical questions? Okay, anyone? Seeing none, moving on to public comment. Anyone here from the public to speak to this site? Okay, back to the commission. Public comment is closed. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to adopt the findings and recommendation as stated in the staff report.
Or second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Kathy?
Will there be verification of whether or not it's already been completed in the approval process?
I mean, we can check into that, and then if they do get their CUP, then it comes back through for site plan review, so we review the plans at that point.
Okay, all right.
Other discussion. Mayor?
I guess this is more of a statement that is, while we really encourage improvements and upgrades and things like that, we don't necessarily want to encourage people to continue to do work without a permit. So it puts this body in such an awkward position.
A late fee doesn't seem like enough.
Right. Because what if we say no, right? And that's concrete, correct?
Yeah, they're proposing concrete.
You know, so just kind of a cautionary element that when we just customarily say it's okay and a little bit of a fine, yes, we want to encourage the improvements, but not without former approval. That's all.
All right, and go ahead, John.
I just want to add on real quick. A couple of years before you got here, we've been on this. We've raked people across the coals when they hear about not getting permission first, and I think city staff knows that we want something done. We just don't know where we're going to go with that. So hopefully, maybe you can help out with that too, with your leadership.
As the mayor of the great city of Oshkosh.
Yes.
Put that on your to-do list.
Me on the spot there, but
Yeah.
thanks.
Well, it's probably more of a council issue than a plan commission. I mean,
Yeah.
any other discussion? All right, call the roll, please.
Ford,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
Terry,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Prop,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Boytek.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
Okay. Item number 5, land disposition of property located on the northeast corner of Rath Lane and North Keller Street. Do we have any site visits here today? We have a number of them. I was out there as well. We accept the staff report as part of the record. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request for a land disposition of a city-owned outlot on the south side of North Keller Street, just north of Oshkosh Avenue. The subject site, which is located south of Lakeshore Park, and Oshkosh Corporation, of course, is a little bit further north. This request originated by the property owners to the south. A little more background here. Next week, I believe, Kelly, Common Council will be considering the vacation of Rath Lane east of North Keller Street. And with this particular vacation, let me go to the next slide here. There we go. With this particular vacation, this section right here would revert back to this original property owner, and this section here reverts back to the city, which was originally part of Lakeview Golf Course, or Lakeview Golf Course, Lakeshore Golf Course. What the city is proposing is to dispose of this piece to the owners of these lots down here, and then once the Common Council, if they choose to approve the vacation, this would then entirely revert back to this property here, and this section would revert back to the south, and then eventually all pieces would be placed together into one larger parcel.
And a little background on the reason why we have that access land is when we were doing the road configuration and layout to serve Oshkosh Corporation, there's wetlands in the area, some other environmental concerns that we had to avoid. So we try to minimize, the impact of having some land like this, but unfortunately there are wetlands in that area where the subject site is, so we did our best to avoid them. So that's why we currently have some of this additional land that unfortunately doesn't serve a purpose to the city right now. And it was just about a year ago where we did dispose of land that was access land to the developer to the east. We disposed of Outlot 1 to them to add to their site in return for dedicating right away, which is a similar situation. The landowner which Jeff is proposing to dedicate right away and a valuable area intersection in the city. So that's a little background on the site of why we have that land.
Now here, there's 3 concepts for Lakeshore Park. The original thought was this area could have been used for public parking for access to the park. Staff, or the Parks Department is currently reviewing different options for a master plan for the park. And all three of their early concepts do show parking availability to access the pedestrian ways throughout that will be or is proposed to be located throughout the park. So,
And this request did go in front of the Advisory Parks Board last Monday, and they did vote to dispose of the land. So we had a lengthy discussion about that, and we do have our Parks Director, Ray Mauer, here too, if anybody has any specific questions. But staff did an analysis to see, how, if we could use it for anything, working with the consultants, with the park plan and the Parks Department, if it would be usable. Since the outlot is in irregular shape, it's small, we can't sell it as an outright, lot to develop on. So we were looking for other ways that we could potentially use it, but unfortunately, we kind of did a cost-benefit analysis, and it did not have much benefit to the city to continue to maintain, and some additional work we'd have to do to get pedestrians across the street, in a very busy street that we're anticipating in the future.
yeah, up on the screen are two concepts. One on the left side is, which one is that? With the vacation. Okay, so that shows a proposed parking or a buildable area if the street were vacated. So you would get 6-7 parking stalls out of it. And then on the right side, if there was no street vacation, it literally leaves no buildable area for anything due to setback requirements and the zone district it's in, corporate business park zone
It's
district.
currently an industrial or institutional, but the setbacks are the same. So we did have a petitioner who is requesting that it is disposed of, and as I mentioned before, they are dedicating some right-of-way to the city for in the future, if we do need to expand Keller, that right-of-way is there. Like I said, staff did an analysis just to see, what the impact would be if we did keep it, what the maintenance would be, and ultimately came up with a recommendation to dispose of it.
Anything else, Jeff? Technical questions? Mayor and then Justin?
Okay, so in the staff report, it states that Outlet 2 is undevelopable due to the irregular shape and the restrictions. But then we say that he would be able to expand his developable footprint.
When it would be combined with his property, yes.
So it's either developable or not developable.
If it's combined with a larger piece of property, it can be used for development as a part of a lot combination.
Justin?
And this may have gone through before I was on the planning commission, but this is maybe the fourth meeting where something with that intersection and that strip of land has come before the planning commission. It really has a feeling of kind of piecemeal, kind of anti-planning. And I'm wondering, is there like a broader plan that we should be following along, or I should be following along, where then this is like the next step and the next step? Or is it just kind of winging it, and whatever comes up in front of us, then we're supposed to say, well, this isn't needed land? And next meeting, it might be needed land, but we've already gotten rid of it. Is there like some sort of comprehensive plan that the planning department has available that we can see that what we're doing here with this plot is planned and not just?
Well, the reason with multiple requests is, you had the street vacation. There's certain requirements as far as public notice, and so that's why we were following some of those. So it will go to council at the same meeting. So that's why PC is a little ahead of the game, because I believe the vacation was 45 days.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reason for that. But as far as a plan, Jeff showed 3 different concepts for the park plan, and we did work with the park consultant that's working on that park plan and the parks director, just to make sure that we were not, disposing of this land that may be useful to them in the future. And disposing of the land, the Outlet 1 last year, somewhat set a standard of, we probably don't need it, because we did do the same sort of analysis last year too on the same area. And unfortunately, it is a small piece of land. It's irregular shape. There's wetlands, so there are some struggles that, folks would need to go through and get ahead of to try to develop it.
Sure, as much as possible, if there is something where I could feel like, all right, what we're doing fits into this vision or this somewhat of a plan that city's doing, so that it's not, it just really has this piecemealing feel of not being planned out. And I'm sure you maybe have a vision, but it just hasn't really been shared, at least with me or the committee while I've been on it. Yeah.
Sure. And I guess just to comment on that, we have to follow an order, a sequence of approvals that are made before we can do something else. So in this situation, if Plan Commission approves this land disposition and council next week also approves the street vacation and land disposition, the petitioner will come back with the CSM. So you will see another, part of this project coming through with the CSM, but unfortunately we are just set with certain requirements and approvals we need before we can do something else.
Right, so maybe, let's say 3 months ago, there would have been these 12 steps that you were planning that would have helped us to make informed decisions. Because I feel like when I'm voting on this part right here, I wasn't aware of then, we're going to get, because we had talked about possibly signs or possibly parking. But if it was already known that we are going to be getting rid of that land, well, maybe that could have been shared so that the Plan Commission had a comprehensive vision. Or at least knew what your comprehensive vision was. Or if you don't have a vision, then we know that as well. Like, we don't really have a plan, and we're winging it. But it sounds like that's not what you're doing. So if you have that information, I would greatly appreciate it, especially if things are going to continue to come forward.
Okay.
Yep, here's one more piece to this puzzle, and I think you mentioned, this section still will have to come back before this body for the official dedication of this widening of North Keller Street. So,
You've already approved something related to that.
the official mapping, that's to preserve that land or protect that land. So, unfortunately, there are several steps sometimes with this.
Sure.
Thank you. Other technical questions? Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I think, we Plan Commission voted to vacate Rath Lane, like last time, I think. So we've already voted to vacate it, which is fine, because it's sort of a useless appendage right now. How is this developer, and I don't know if those two, we'll find out in the workshop, I think, if those two lots are gonna be combined for a future development, or along with another one maybe, but how are they going to access, how are people going to access that property if the entirety of Rath Lane is vacated?
Right. The DOT, when they did redo the 21 intersection area, there is an access restriction that they did place on Keller, going probably halfway up on Keller there. So the applicant would need to provide or have access off of Rath Lane, and that the city is working with them on that. But that's what was part of the reason why we wanted to make sure that staff was, or counselors and plan commissioners were aware that if we would not vacate it, or we would vacate it but maybe not dispose of the land, they would probably need to provide access to that private developer, kind of in the existing Rath Lane area or perhaps on Keller. So that's something that we do need to consider, that's where their access would be. There are restrictions from the DOT that the city does not have control of towards the south there near the roundabout. And he will be coming back for a CSM to combine all those lots as part of the city's requirements.
Okay, but the access would be at Rath Lane, because that will be there.
That's something that we're
We're
proposing.
talking about the blue segment here.
Right.
We're not talking about the rest of Rath Lane, so that would be their property.
The Rath Lane,
Anyhow.
if they
Whether we
would,
disposed or not, that's their property, the end of Rath Lane.
yes, you're correct.
Yeah.
If the street vacation goes through.
Okay, well then I just, I want to thank people. I suspect that I made a comment when we vacated that I didn't want to see this parcel disposed of without thinking about possible parking overflow or something like that. And I appreciate the fact that people did make an attempt. Frankly, I thought it was kind of a feeble attempt. If you want to go back to the slide with the parking. Yeah, that. I think that's kind of sad.
Well, I mean,
That's the nature of
I'm not going to prevail in this today. I don't think so. I'm not going to make a big issue out of it. But it seems to me like setbacks are excessive, and something could have been done with that unless we're looking at wetlands underneath.
There are wetlands there in the.
Underneath where the green part, I'm
Yeah.
talking on the one on the left, but the potential possible parking.
Yeah, there are some wetlands that do infringe in that parcel there on the outlot too. And the setbacks are is what is in what's in our
Yeah,
zoning
but then
code right
there's
now.
always,
There is,
There's
yep.
always,
Mechanisms.
Yeah.
yes.
Yep.
But the problem with that potential parking, as I think you've stated, is that the applicant we would not be able to vacate.
Well, we
Lane
could,
because, or we'd have to have an agreement with the applicant in order to have, because DOT wouldn't allow us to have parking, access to any kind of parking from Keller. Is that-
we need to make sure that we have some sort of access for them.
Right,
Uh,
and right now, DOT is, as far as you're
There's
saying,
some-
they don't want to allow.
There's some restrictions on
access.
Keller right now, so obviously when they come back for site plan approval, we'll work through some of those. It's a PD. You will see it again coming through Plan Commission. But we just want to let PC know that that is something we might need to accommodate with this project, to provide them access through that area on Rath.
DOT, or the petitioner?
Yes.
Okay, the petitioner.
Okay, I'll say something later.
Mayor?
I just want to address what Mr. Mitchell brought up about overarching, and this just goes back to council having stated that the remaining acreage after the Oshkosh Corporation development was to remain part of Lakeshore Park. And I know that we did dispose of another outlet, and it seems that the original requests or visions or conceptual things about more development over there, while that did not occur and council did not approve that, it seems like there is a kind of a scope creep here, and that we keep, taking little pieces here, little pieces there away, and I understand some of the challenges here, but with that vacation on Rath Lane, it seems that it is doable to allow access off of Rath Lane, since that vacation is taking place, without necessarily disposing of this extra half acre. Is that correct?
You are correct that if we would vacate it, we would get a portion of that vacated area. If you remember, part of that at the end of the cul-de-sac does go back to the property owner, just due to the fact how the DOT acquired it, however many years ago. As far as disposing of excess land, this is the only other piece that unfortunately staff was not able to, we couldn't work around it. We tried our hardest to follow the property lines of the existing private lines where the golf course and the private property met, but unfortunately we were not able to do that with wetlands that were in the way and other environmental concerns. So this is the last piece of, I'd say, just access land that unfortunately we could not get north of Keller or in the larger Lakeshore Park mass.
Go ahead, Justin.
Maybe this is a question for Ray as well, I'm not sure, but you mentioned that there's three park concepts that are in works, and in all three of them, this plot is already disposed of, meaning I would hate to get rid of plots of land before we finished our plan for the park space, and so I'm wondering if the three conceptual plans that the Parks Department is looking at all already have this plot gone, or?
Does that wait for the first? Yeah, it does.
Yeah, like I said, we worked with the Parks Division and with the consultant to let them know that there was some land there. And just as far as the flow of the park and where they were encouraging people to park, everything was north of Keller. They did not want to have folks crossing the street, and they wanted it all to be on the north side of Keller for ease of getting in and out of the park. So I think that was the reason why they decided it was probably not worth it to put a smaller parking lot on the south side also. And if you do look, they do have multiple parking lots throughout the different three conceptual plans and the different areas of the park. And they did try to also utilize existing facilities out there. There's maintenance facilities on the west side of the park, on the east side of the park. So they were looking to use some of those areas that are already set up for parking to offer to folks.
All right, other technical questions?
Yes.
Go ahead. Okay, Michael and then Justin.
This gets back to the mayor's earlier point. So with this vacation, that becomes developable land for the whoever it's being vacated to. Are there discussions ongoing about what would go there? What type of thing?
What type of use
can they
you're
do that we
looking
can't
at?
do? Yeah.
I believe the developer is looking at multiple uses right now, so that's something that would come back to this group because it is planned development. So it's a corporate business park zoning plan development. So he would be required to combine all those parcels and then come back to a group with any site plans for a GDP SIP.
Okay, so technically, they could take out that road, right, that we vacated before. They can demolish that.
Yes, yep, if council decides to vacate Rath Lane.
Okay, and the city, could they have done the same thing? Was there any restriction on the city? I guess what I'm getting at here is part of your cost-benefit analysis for whether or not the city could develop that land as an independent plot to take into account combining those two.
Jeff did do, an analysis of that. If you can go back to the... So the one on the left side, that is with a street vacation. So that is, you can see that one part that would go back to the private property owner is out, and just with setbacks and then the kind of just the nature, the shape of the parcel, and the existing infrastructure that would need to be provided, that is what they could install for parking.
Other uses beyond parking, were they considered? No.
We like I said, we looked at other uses, but as far as what the park needed, parking I think was the main kind of driver as far as what they would potentially use it for. We don't need it for stormwater. We don't need it for anything else, I guess, from a city standpoint to serve the park.
Justin.
You mentioned wetland concerns on that particular little plot, and I'm wondering what development how that would impact your wetland concerns there.
Right. So if the Plan Commission and Council would decide to dispose of the property and vacate it to the petitioner, that area probably would, my guess, be used for his stormwater quality and green space requirements, just the way the site flows to the north towards the water body. So my guess is that'd be a perfect spot for stormwater quality. So my guess is that would probably be more green space, stormwater quality, landscaping requirements would be met in that area.
Do we have someone here that can answer that question?
Yep.
Any other technical questions? Okay, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Please.
Hi, I'm Will Steiner. I'm the petitioner on behalf of the owner, which is our company, Prime Space LLC. So we've owned the houses to the south for a few months, and this has been a long process because it's multi-step. Vacation of the street, and then there's very long time periods for notice. So for us, it's taking a long time. So we're equally frustrated. And because we don't know exactly how the land is going to lay out, we haven't developed very good plans, concept plans, until we actually have a lot where we know the boundaries and where the street access might be. So really don't have much to show in the form of concept plans, but we're very open to all sorts of uses. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Go ahead.
My question would be then, just what we were speaking about, if that were swapped, would you intend to do impervious development in that northern half acre, or would you be committing to maintaining that as what we call green infrastructure and stormwater?
Well, a good portion of it can't be developed because it's the setback,
right.
the 30 feet, and then the northeast part of that is wetland, so it has to be mitigated. And then the overall site requires green space, and that's the least valuable part because it's the furthest from the intersection. So that's most likely where much of the green space requirement would be met. So probably. However, we'll be back with plans for you to review, and you can tell us if we've done a good job or not, and if we have to make some revisions to those plans.
Other questions for Mr. Steiner? Thank you, sir. We feel your pain. Right. Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Okay, back to the commission. Do we have a motion?
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. What kind of discussion do we have that we haven't already had? Tom?
I just want to say that I continue to be disappointed in the effort to try and redevelop that land. I think that there are plenty of opportunities for the city to maintain those lots to utilize for the good of the community, not only just in park space. Parking is not necessarily an issue, but you have an opportunity for a specialized garden. You have an opportunity for something for people with physical disabilities. You have an opportunity to have it in your inventory to allow for a lot for a nonprofit organization to utilize through the community development block grant programs and those types of things. And I think that this is a wasted opportunity to just go ahead and dispose of it when there are plenty of opportunities that could be available with some proper planning for the future, for the betterment of the city as a whole.
Okay, thank you. Others? Go ahead, Kathy, and then Michael.
Yeah, of course, I'm well known for being frustrated, as maybe Lori is, at nibbling away at the park. We've nibbled here and we've nibbled there, and some of what we had to do, but there's less and less park left, people. And I think that's the source of my frustration. But I do recognize that if we have to go with that ridiculous-looking parking area, which I'm not convinced we do, but if we do, then we might as well dispose of it. It's not as useful as I hoped it would be, but I agree with Tom also.
Michael?
Yeah, so I'm putting in a new deck in my backyard, and it's a great plan, but I've been on the phone with electricians and plumbers, talking to everyone except the people that build the deck. So I get, stuff happens, right? You have a plan, stuff comes up. It's just inevitable when you go through a process like this. That said, if we dispose of land, that's something we can't take back. So I think some of the frustration here is that, yes, we're happy we get to see what's eventually sent to us in this plan. But we've already made the decision to dispose of the land. So if we don't like what we saw, well, then what do we get? What do we do with that situation? Cart's a little bit before the horse. And I think it just contributes to this feeling that I'm picking up here, that instead of us being a deliberative body involved in planning, we become an affirmative body that just has to sign off on a plan, a decision that's already been made. I mean, it's a rough parallel, but it's kind of like someone who did the work on their bar and then come here and say, do you approve or not approve? So it's just important to keep that in mind. I think that's the frustration that you're hearing from us.
Any other comment? Go ahead, Justin.
Sorry that I didn't ask this question earlier. You mentioned that there's a land swap in the works.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if we don't give that land? Is it just that the city pays for the acquisition?
That's correct. Yep.
And is it comparable land space? I mean, is it?
It's a little bit less. It is obviously less, but as Will had, or Mr. Steiner had mentioned, it is much more valuable. His land that he is dedicating is much more valuable than the land in the back. So we would probably work with our assessors or do an appraisal to figure out what the value would be for that land that we would need to acquire.
And I'm guessing that the increment that could even potentially be added here because of the nature of the restrictions would be pretty minimal. And I guess I'd just like to say that just because we can doesn't mean we should. And I'm going to lean on the preservation side here.
Thank you. Other discussion? There's a motion and a second, so let us call the roll and see how this goes.
Ford,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Heaver,
Aye.
Palmieri,
No.
Perry,
No.
Mitchell,
No.
Prop,
Aye.
Erickson,
No.
Wojtek.
Aye.
All right, 5-4. What is that?
Council will have something to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on to Planning Director's report. update on 1911 West Snell Road from somebody. A property we have some familiarity with.
Since Mark's not here, I'll fill you guys in. So on July 18th, Mr. Rangeloff did submit a new site plan. The site plan was not in compliance with all of the plan development conditions. So we did pass those conditions that they need to meet on to Lauren. And I also met with Lauren last Thursday to discuss, what he needs to do to bring that site plan into compliance. We did request that he submit those changes to us by early this week. Nothing has come in yet, so he still needs to get that into us. Some of those things include still needs to have that site fully dimensioned, including for setbacks, parking stall, drive width. We still need a detailed landscaping plan. There's also a drive aisle that's required within that enclosed storage area that was not shown on the plan. So he has some things he needs to do to make that plan in compliance with the plan development approval. After that, he will need to get a permit for the fencing and landscaping and striping, and then he can start working on those items.
Right, so, any questions for Brian? Go ahead, Tom.
I drive by it 2 times a day. It's getting fuller and fuller. There's absolutely no improvement whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I would say it's worse than when the last time we discussed it. So it's just based on my observation and no scientific methodology whatsoever.
You are not the only person who has noticed that it has gotten fuller.
I guess I'll probably talk to Mark and the city attorney
Yeah.
as far as timeframes for this stuff, so.
Other questions or comments for Brian? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn so we can move on to workshop?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're adjourned on to workshop.